You may be wondering what are genetically modified foods. Well, it's right in the name. Food that has been changed with the latest molecular biology.
They've modified the foods in a laboratory to enhance desired traits such as herbicides, increased resistance, and improved nutrition content.
The world's population is always changing and growing, as if now the world's population is at the large number of 6 million people and is predicted to double in the next 50 years. Genetically engineering our food can ensure enough food supply for this large-scale amount of people. It's going to be a huge challenge to supply food for millions, even with genetic engineering. I can't imagine how hard it would be without it.
Crops dying and becoming no good due to insects are devastating the financial stability of farmers, and it isn't helping all of the starvation in third world countries. Farmers use pesticides and chemically treated fertilizers annually, and many buyers and consumers don't want to eat the food that has been treated with chemicals and pesticides, having the huge risk of potential health hazards.
There are a lot of viruses, fungi, and bacteria that causes plant disease. Recently, plant biologists have been working to create plants with genetically engineered resistance to all of these diseases. As the population grows and more land is used for housing instead of produce, farmers will need to grow crops in places they once couldn't. Creating plants that can withhold long periods of drought or high salt content in soil. Think of all the possibilities to be able to grow crops in once inhospitable places.
Malnutrition is extremely common in the third world countries, where many rely on one crop like rice as their source of nourishment. Unfortunately, rice does not have the sufficient nutrients to yield malnutrition. But just think, what if rice could be genetically engineered to contain additional minerals and vitamins and nutrients? There are a lot of diseases in third world countries due to malnutrition. Did you know that without vitamin A, a person could go blind? However, researchers at Swiss Federal Institute of Technology for Plant and Science have created a form of golden rice containing an unusual high content of beta-carotene, otherwise known as vitamin A.
Medicines and vaccines are often very expensive to make and sometimes require a special type of storage to keep from spoiling, and these medicines are not yet ready for the developing countries. In that case, researchers are working steadily to develop a type of edible vaccine in tomatoes and potatoes. These types of vaccines will be much easier to ship, store, and deliver than the traditional injections.
According to the FDA and USDA, there are over 40 plant varieties that have met all federal requirements to sell. Some examples: tomatoes and cantaloupes have modified ripening characteristics. Sugar beets and soybeans have also been modified to be resistant to herbicides. Corn and cotton plants have been modified to be resistant to pests. Not all of these products are available in stores yet. However, genetically modified foods in the U.S. grocery stores is more widespread than is commonly thought.
The food gets a lot of criticism from environmental activists, religious organizations, public interest groups, professional associations, and other scientists, along with government officials. They have all raised concern to this genetically engineered food.
Genetically modified foods are pretty new and have not been used long enough to know all of the risks. These foods have not been put through thorough research and testing. Foods that are genetically altered can involve risks and unknown toxins, allergies never been seen before in humans.
Food crops grown from genetically modified seeds can have an effect on the weeds that grow in the same area. If the weeds can access the modified genes, it can make the weeds resistant to pesticides. This means more chemicals will be needed to destroy these resistant weeds, which can greatly impact the safety of the crops. More chemicals used can mean food which should not be eaten. Glyphosate, which is added to crops to make them resistant to weeds, causes a higher plant estrogen level. Estrogen affects all mammals, including humans. Higher estrogen levels can pose long-term health risks, such as long-term flu-like symptoms, decimating the health of unborn babies, trouble ovulating, and lack of fertility.
Genetically altering seeds and foods can pose unknown risks of toxins and allergens that have never been presented before. This has been seen before with an L-tripotent supplement produced in 1989. This supplement caused 37 deaths and affected 1,500 more. The bacteria was altered genetically, resulting in a new and extremely toxic amino acid, never seen before. Think of it as never being seen before. Who's to say it won't turn into a virus and spread? How would we stop something we are completely alien to? Genetically modified foods have not had long-term research done. The government approved the food under the assumption that the risks were no different than the preservatives we use now, even the unmodified foods, which was a big mistake. The genetic modification done to the plants can have a dramatic risk on health and safety. There is no long-term risk information available to determine if the risks are long-lived, short-lived, or even permanent. One of the biggest dangers with genetic modification is that it is not labeled. There are no federal requirements. These foods make up 1/4 of the food supply in the U.S. It is in more foods than you think. Without labeling, it is impossible to know which foods have higher risks, so you can't avoid them and protect the health of you and your family.
There is no way to tell if genetically modified foods can have an effect on the genetics of people. At first, it was believed by scientists and researchers that modified genes were destroyed in the digestive process, but recently modified food genes have been found in the brains of some infant mice. This can be dangerous in children and infants with their growth and development, and poses unknown risks for anyone who eats the food. When genetically altered soybeans were used as a part of the diet for dairy cows, the results showed higher percentages of fat in the milk. This alone shows genetically modified foods should not be considered as safe, and at the very least should be labeled, so we can take precautions and stay safe.